What's up, everybody? Um, this is a portion where I start off with something, and I chose another book. I chose The Alchemist. I was going to say the guy's name, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to mess it up. I think it's Paulo. Say the last name? Yep, what he said. um, the reason why I chose this book, I don't know if it was my favorite book, but it definitely was my most impactful book. I thought I was a reader before I read this book, but then I read the book, and then I think it kind of spearheaded me into my path of reading. It's a story about a young guy who thinks he knows what he wants and finds out that his life purpose is bigger than what it is, and he goes on this crazy journey to ultimately find out what he was looking for was inside of him already. The reason why that's was a big deal because I picked that book up, I think it was my third year, and I just got hurt. I hurt my foot, and I talked to the doctors, and they said I was supposed to be out 8 weeks. And up until that point in my career, I hadn't been injured in that way. And so, like everybody, I think, when you go through injuries and things of that nature, you have negative thoughts. And so I had this vision of, being hurt, and, I thought that my career wasn't going to go the way that that I envisioned on it going. I was really down at that point, but, reading that book really opened my eyes to focusing on being in the moment. And I think, too, I have this weird theory that when I get hurt, it means it's almost like God's way of slowing me down, like I'm putting off something that I'm supposed to be doing. So there was things that in my life that I felt I was supposed to be doing, supposed to be focused on, that I wasn't. And so I felt like that was a way to slow me down. So, and it really helped me in that moment. It really helped me in that time. And then, I think that was the first year I ended up being an All-Pro and Pro Bowl, and it really let me know that, a lot of times as human beings, we feel like we know the future, and we really don't. And so all we can do is control what we do in this moment and control our mindset in the moment, and the future always takes care of itself. And so that's when I really started to model my life after that. And so I say that to say I know that this season is not going the way that we hoped it, but all we can do in this moment is focus on now, focus on the things that we can get better at now, and make those decisions to be better, play better, and the future will write itself. Questions?
Who put you onto that book?
That is a great question. I don't remember. I've heard about the book a lot. Whenever I asked somebody, they would always say their favorite book was. I had two different opinions. Everybody that I spoke to said that book was their favorite book, and then I had some people that said it wasn't that good. You really just had to read the last 3 pages, and you got the gist of the book. And so in that moment, I felt like, well, I had time on my hands. I wasn't doing anything, so there was no reason for me to just read the last 3 pages, even though, I could kind of agree. But I think there was a lot that happened in that moment that, or throughout the book, that I think can be applied to life. So I don't remember who. I think it was just, asking people what their favorite book was, and felt like I had enough time on my hands to give it a shot.
You mentioned that it's particularly relevant now, given how the season has gone. What's the level of frustration in the locker room? Or is that the word you would even use to describe the locker room?
Obviously, there is some frustration because you have, a lot of guys that are, want to win, a lot of guys who are hungry to win, and the tradition here has been winning. And so, obviously, it's not going the way that we want it to go, but I think at the end of the day, everybody just wants to win and do their part to turn this thing around. And I think that's the gist of the locker room is what can we do right now to, start to chip away at this hole that we put ourselves in.
Bobby, we saw you on the sidelines of the game after DK Metcalf got his penalty and was ejected, and you were talking to him. What was the message?
I just was talking to him, understanding that this moment is bigger than we need it to be. Like, just kind of lock back in. That's really all it is. I mean, I think I've been around a lot of passionate people like Sherm and Cam, and sometimes the camera caught it, sometimes it didn't, and this is a passionate gameplay with a lot of emotions, and sometimes you need a person to kind of bring you back in.
It looked like he said he didn't want to hear from you or whatever. Did you respond?
Yeah, I mean, I'm older than him, so he'll be okay. Sometimes you don't want to listen to people older than you, and then they say the right trigger word to get you to listen. So I know some words.
Does that concern you, his volatility this year? A lot of penalties, a lot of after-play stuff?
No, it doesn't concern me. I think, I think it's part of growth, part of, there's a lot of growth when you come in the first league. I think it depends. I mean, I remember having moments where, I was kind of angry and frustrated and things of that nature on the sidelines, but I wasn't at the level as he is, with, everything he had going on with the chase down, with the stuff that he does off the field, with his hair. Like, so there's a lot of eyes on him. And so they're always going to be looking and seeing. So, I don't think what has happened is anything out of the norm. I think it's very similar to Sherm. After Sherm made that play, everybody's was looking and watching, and they created this narrative that Sherm was this angry player that none of his teammates liked. But if you spoke with every teammate and you spoke with every person, and I'm pretty sure you guys will share the same sentiment, he was an amazing person, a caring person, a thoughtful person. And so, that's kind of just a message to, understand you control your narrative.
Jordyn Brooks seems to have been progressing the last, I don't know, half season, whatever, making a lot of plays. Just what have you seen out of him growth-wise?
I think it's just, the work that he's put in, from, taking extra time, study the playbook, watching film, things of that nature. I think, you're watching him being more comfortable in the defense, more comfortable knowing when you can take your shots, and it's been fun to watch. He's very fast, very instinctive, and, I think he's going to continue to grow and make a lot of plays.
I know we've asked for this before, but the passes to the running backs and things like that, what do you think you need to do to get better at defending?
We just have to see it. Sometimes they're catching us in coverages where they're running us off, and so we just have to have better eyes and react a little bit faster and understand that that's an area that they're going to find their spots. And so watching more film on it as a group and putting his fire out.
When it comes to those screenplays, Pete has talked about Jordyn needing to be able to diagnose those a little bit. He said he's got to feel the pain a little bit more so that he's got the experience. But what do you have to see first to be able to sniff that out?
A lot of those plays comes with experience, comes with time, and just understanding that whenever you're in like a trip formation, or if there's 3 people to the field, oftentimes that backside is where you'll get your screen. And so whoever's on that backside, which tends to be Jordyn sometimes, or it can be myself, it could be Jamal, it can be anybody, depending on the coverage, needs to just understand that that's when they decide to do it, because you have all your players on this side, you have everybody running up, and so that whole side loses. You kind of lose that whole side, and so whoever's on that side got to see, that play. And so I think it just comes with time and experience. KJ didn't come in as the screen master; he developed and turned into that.
It always seemed like he had a knack for it too. I mean, there's some of that. KJ wasn't the screen master to start, but he was.
I think somebody randomly called him the screen master, and he just did it once, and he took pride in it and tried to see how many times he could, diagnose the screen, and once turn it to 30,000. And so, any team that tried to run a screen on KJ was just not smart.
I mean, faced Lamar Jackson, a number of mobile quarterbacks. Is there anything about Kyler Murray that makes him truly unique or different than any other quarterback out there from a defensive player standpoint?
I think, there's a lot of similarities. I think is his quickness. I think you've seen the growth from, if you remember when he was first, when he first got into the league, when he was taking the runs and taking off, he wasn't really looking to get yards. If he can get yards, cool, but anytime he's seen a defender, he just ran out of bounds. And as you've seen the growth in, his confidence, now he's looking to finish the run sometimes or, make that cut and go up the field. So I think you just have to be mindful of that. Sometimes that's the tricky plays. Like, is he going to just run out of bounds or is he going to trick you and take the ball up? And so I think that's something that you have to be conscious of. And you just have to watch film and see how to use them. Not all quarterbacks are, used the same way. Like Cam Newton, they run power, with him. I don't think Arizona will ever do that. They might run draws in the red zone, get everybody, it's a draw in the red zone similar to a screen, get everybody back turn, and then have them take it, up the middle. And so you just have to be mindful of those moments where they try to look, for opportunities to get them the ball, whether it's, run the running back that way and pull two pullers that way. It makes you kind of slow foot, and that's what you don't want to have with a guy that fast.
How much more strain does it put on you as a linebacker when you're playing a quarterback like that on an offense that runs a lot of four wide sets and runs more spread concepts than most of the teams in the league? Does that alter things for you?
I don't know if strain is the right word. I think it makes you have to be more disciplined, and it makes you have to be on your communication and understanding. Like sometimes even on the read zone, you can play it right. You can have it to where the read is for him to give the ball to the running back, but he feels confident in himself that he can outrun that D lineman. And so a lot of that is just not leaving tackling him to one person, like making sure that we all rally to him. And, if you watch the game that we played here last time, we did a really good job of making sure that there was a lot of people, on him, because I do feel like if he sees multiple people, he tends to just go down.
They've been without Hopkins for a couple games now. He may be back this week. Just how does he change that offense when he's in there?
He provides an amazing weapon. I think he gives him, you get him the ball on the outside, see what he can do with it, and obviously, when in doubt, a lot of quarterbacks, when they're playing with him, they just throw it up and know that, if it's two guys, three guys, there's a strong chance for him to come down with the ball. So you just got to be physical with them, understand they're going to get him the ball, and he's a guy that you have to just, slow down, and you understand that he's going to make some plays. But the more you minimize the great plays that he makes, the better the outcome is.
You got to know him very well. I know you're both Jordyn guys.
Yeah, I got to know him. Is he Jordyn? No, I just think his gloves were Jordyn when he made that catch. Yeah, I got to know him. Me and him share the same wealth manager, so I've gotten to know him over time, and obviously we both did our deals. So, I've always admired what he's done on and off the field.
Record-wise, this is pretty unfamiliar territory for you guys. Just what's sort of the mood of the team right now and all that?
I think we're, understanding that, we don't have much more margin for error. We can't keep giving games away. We can't keep, shooting ourselves in the foot. And so I think it's, a lot of the messaging is getting out of our way. There were some penalties that we had that could have been avoided. And so, especially when you're playing, great teams like Green Bay or Arizona or whoever we have coming up, there's already enough against us. We can't get in our own ways.
What gives you hope you can turn this around?
Say it again.
What gives you hope you can turn this around?
I think the confidence in myself, my leadership, confidence in the guys in the building, their leadership, their focus, their want to, get it done. I think everybody in the building cares, and a lot of times that's really all you need. Sometimes is for people to care. Sometimes, I haven't been on too many losing programs outside of, unfortunately, Utah State. That if you get to a point where people stop caring, and that's when the lose start piling up. And so I don't see that. I see everybody's caring, everybody's locked in, everybody understands and has the belief that we can get this turned around. And again, like I said in the beginning, we have to focus on this moment and what we can do right now, because we don't know how to tell the future, but we could tell a lot in the moment.
How do you cool down after losses? Like right after the game, what do you do?
Oh, that's a great question. It depends. I like to listen to music. I like to be around family. I like to watch Dave Chappelle, Martin, Fresh Prince. Yeah, I have a lot of nieces and nephews and little people, and so I think when you're around those people, you understand that they don't care about none of that stuff, and those little people kind of remind me what life is about. So sometimes being around them, yeah, maybe some pizza.
So you don't like focus on the game. You go away from the game. Don't watch anything. Don't talk about it at all. Just get away from it.
I always watch the film after the game. So I try to watch the film within that time of having whatever emotion that I have after the game. And then after I watch the film, I try to get away from it for a second. Good, bad, and different, you know what I mean? Whether I had a good game, whether I had a bad game, whether I had good plays, bad plays. You understand that you play this game long enough, you're going to have games where you walk away and you feel really, really good, and you're going to have games where you left some plays out there. Maybe you didn't perform your best, and you try to look at the overall picture versus, what's going on at that point, knowing that, it can be changed.
You watching film and seeing stuff and tendencies during the week or middle of the night, whenever. How does that stuff get related to your teammates and stuff, like tendencies you're seeing? Is that just in team meetings? Do you text them?
Yeah, team meetings, conversations. Sometimes I watch film with Jamal and Diggs, and sometimes I'm watching film with Jordyn. Sometimes I'm watching film with Nort. And so, every conversation is different. Every, viewpoint is different. And so you're trying to, with each conversation, you're trying to find, one or two plays where we can all be on the same play, and maybe that'd be a play where you can get a pick, sack, something happens. So I think the conversation is throughout the week. Sometimes Diggs texts me, sometimes Jamal does, Jordyn. Like, we all text each other, depending on the scheme of the week and things of that nature. But the conversation is typically, talked about in the building through the week, and obviously film outside of the building, like when we're not in meetings.
What stands out about the way Quandre sees the game?
I think the uniqueness is he started off as a nickel, and so he has a really, really good understanding of splits because he played that position so much. And so when he moved to safety, he's able to help some of the younger nickels out and even some of the corners out, and kind of help them explain, splits and what you get from certain splits. And then he's just, he's really aggressive. I love the way he comes down and, from the post and fills the alley. And so that's definitely a uniqueness for sure, the way he wants to come in and hit. It's not many safeties that like to do that like that.
Do you ever get anxious before games, or have you ever gotten anxious before games?
I don't know if anxious is the word. I don't know what the word is. I don't know. I really just zone out before the games. Obviously, I don't want to say worry. Maybe anxious is the word. I think you just, you play the game in your head, and you have a vision of how you want the game to go. And as you get closer and closer to the game, I kind of throw the vision out and, kind of focus in and, try to recreate whatever I had going on in my head. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But more times than not, I'm more so worried about making sure that I can relay whatever's going in my head to the other guys.
For the 2 Super Bowls, what do you remember feeling before the games?
Before the first Super Bowl, honestly, I wasn't really nervous about the game. I was more so nervous about that moment where all the flashes happened. Because I don't know, it was weird. I always watched it on TV, and I was wondering if I would pay more attention to that than the actual game. But yeah, the kickoff. Because you dream of being in the game in that moment and just seeing all the flashes. So I was kind of paying attention to that too long, and then I snapped back. And and then after that, the second Super Bowl, it was in Arizona. So we had played in that stadium so many times up to that point, so it wasn't really like a big deal.
Do guys still ask you what that was like younger guys who haven't played in a big game?
Not really, not really. They more so ask about how it is playing certain players, or you know, ask about how to stay in this league for a long time. I think that's the majority of the conversation.
Last thing, what stands out about Trey Brown and the way he recognizes routes for a rookie?
I think the biggest thing is the way that he studies the game. I think that's what gives him his confidence. And then he plays with no fear. You know, when he sees something, he goes. And that was something that you noticed, you know, when he first got here. He wasn't afraid to take a chance. And sometimes, you know, when you have a young guy or rookie come in, they want to do right, and they want to be like the playbook so bad that it almost makes them scared to be instinctive. And so that was the first thing I noticed when he got here. He wasn't afraid to be instinctive, and he knew how to talk ball. Like some people, you know, you can't really have a conversation with him because they may not understand splits. They may not understand the defense that well, but he caught everything on pretty fast, and just instinctively, you know, he knew how to talk ball.
Thank you, Bobby.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you.